good morning, and welcome to the newest edition of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I am your host, Sam Sprunger. I'm in Dalton's chair today, and we had to go to the Wayback Machine and pull in our substitute. We got Tony from the inside, the Who's Your Mind, mister, and thanks for coming in and filling in for me while I fill in for Dalton.
Hey, I appreciate it, and it's so good. It's been like a year, hasn't it?
It's been a minute.
It's been a hot minute since I've been on Big Talk. So if I'm a little rusty, especially at the end, if I try to do a shout out on the show, everybody, please. It's been a minute, all right. No rusty. I gotta knock the ring rust off a little bit.
We still love you, even if you screw it up, whatever. But yeah, so we a lot happening. First off, how are you?
I am doing great. Okay. College football wise, I'm dying a little on the inside. For anybody who does watch the show pretty frequently, I love the Big Ten, but I'm also an LSU Tigers fan, and unfortunately, my harsh reality of this past weekend came true. I was like, well, they're probably going to lose to Texas A&M. They had my hopes up a little bit. They were 17-7. LSU was winning. I was like, okay, maybe. And then my hopes were immediately dashed. It's 38-23 final score. I was like, there it is. There's that disappointment I was looking for.
There's that other shoe.
There it is.
Finally.
But on the other side, on my Big Ten side, Michigan State, a little bit of disappointment this past weekend. We'll dive into that a little bit deeper here in a bit, though. There's promise, though. There's a lot of promise. This is definitely a complete and total flip from the previous year. Yeah. And the previous regime. I already like what Jonathan Smith is doing there in East Lansing, but again, we'll dive into that here in a little bit.
You're awful assumptive,
huh?
You're awful assumptive that we're just going to dive into those later.
Maybe we will. Maybe we won't.
We will. But let's talk about a couple of games from last week, and I've been asked, why is it you wait till Friday to talk? Because you know what, we talk about the most important stuff.
Yes.
We won't cover, if we did this on a Wednesday, like we used to back in the day, we'd cover more of them because we were, reacting to those games. Mm-hmm. Whereas we do our Fridays and we pull up the most important games and kind of give our take and things like that. So just a little heads up, kids, as to why we do this on Friday, even though it's almost a week past its play date or whatever you want to call it. But USC Rutgers, that was the Friday night game. That was the unusuality of World Series game. Then a Big Ten football game kicks off after it at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard or Eastern Daylight Time. And yes. That was the unusual. I watched the first half, and it was 28-12 at the half, but it was actually a pretty competitive game. But for the most part, this actually went the way that I was expecting. So there's not really a ton that I have to say anything about. But do you have anything from the USC Rutgers game?
Not really. This is more of one of those USC finally gets its second win in conference, especially against someone that is, we'll call them an original Big Ten team as far as the new additions to them. They are an original Big Ten
10 years
team.
In.
They are. So, I mean, all honesty, this is kind of what I expected from USC, though. I definitely expected them to take a step back. I figured they would probably be at about this point. I think that just because of sheer recruiting, because of Lincoln Riley's ability as a head coach, he does still have a prolific offense. The defense is better significantly with Alex Grinch gone, that they're going to probably be able to beat up on a lot of the quote-unquote more 500 to below 500 teams that are in the Big Ten previously. They'll probably be able to get some pretty good significant wins against them, but I still don't necessarily see them being a powerhouse to compete with, the Ohio States, the Penn States, the Michigans just quite yet.
It's coming. I think it's a matter of time. I think there's advantages and things gained from each program coming in. Mm-hmm. And to those programs that are letting those four teams come in, there's things that are gained by each and things that are lost by each. Mm-hmm. And I think by proxy, USC is going to get at least a little bit better with their defense because of the conference they play in And now all of a sudden, some of those players that would be potentially going to USC, oh wow, we get to play at the Big House at least one time during my career, and we get to play at the Shoe. We get to play, all these places that have this gravitas when it comes to the Big Ten. I think that will be a little. I don't think it's gonna, all of a sudden USC's a defensive juggernaut, but I think it is one of those that they will get some residual defense, basically, as long as they're trying.
Yes.
That's the key, is they're trying.
And I think if Lincoln Riley stays there, barring him being fired for any type of just gross mishap that happens, I would say within the next, I'm going to give them at least 3 years just to truly acclimate to, the Big Ten standard. Because you have to think, the Pac-12, I don't know about you, but when I looked at the Pac-12, there was nothing that really stood out. I never looked at a Pac-12 and said, this is really a true defensive conference. I never looked at them and said, this is a really prolific offensive style conference. They were very much, I would almost say, kind of balanced. They never really did anything super great, but they never really did anything super bad either. So for I think for USC and Lincoln Riley, it'll probably take them about 2 to 3 years, get those different style of recruits in there, kind of adapt to the Big Ten style of offense, and defense of how they play. And then I think we'll be able to kind of reevaluate USC here in a couple of years.
Are you familiar with the term West Coast offense?
I am.
Well, the Pac-12 was on the West Coast.
It's true.
They're all about offense in the Pac conference. Don't get me wrong. There were some okay. Oregon's your best defensive historically in the time frame in which of the last, let's say, the 2000s.
Yeah.
Even when USC was number one, their defense wasn't great.
No.
They were putting tons of points on the board. So I think they've got some work to do to get that defense around. But I think, like I said, I think they'll get some residual addition because of what the conference they're in. Let's keep moving on there. Minnesota takes down Maryland 48-23, and the reason why I bring this up is Maryland's 1-4 in the Big Ten, 4-4 overall. Raise your hand if you had Minnesota at 5-3. I didn't. I didn't think they would be a horrible dumpster fire, but I did not envision them sitting right now. And you know what? If they don't get a screwed call on an onside kick, that may be one more win. And if the kicker is just a little bit more to the left, they beat UNC in the opener. They've only lost one game if that's the case.
Yeah. I will say I was in the same boat with Minnesota because, all honesty, I don't really know what to expect out of this PJ Fleck led team because he's that coach that I think he is a very good coach, and I think it's very evident in this season, like you said.
The kids want to play for him.
Yes, and I think because of the fact that, and you look at his team, it's very experienced. He was able to bring a lot of these key players back. Now, he did have a little bit of a change at the quarterback position, but I'm going to be honest with you. When you watched Kalikanakis, I'm completely butchering that.
Sure.
The Greek name that starts with a K.
Yeah.
When he was the starting quarterback for them last year, it was a mess for Minnesota on offense, and he went out to make that change, and you can see the difference in how this Minnesota team is performing now. So I was very skeptical of PJ Fleck. It's like, man, you come in, I think you're very solid. You have the potential, and it's one of those you kind of have one of those underwhelming moments a lot of times. But it's like, so far, it's like, hey, you're 5-3. This is honestly going to be probably a really good year for Minnesota. Don't necessarily expect them to make the playoffs by any stretch, but I still think this is going to be a good year for Minnesota to build off of for next year.
To me, I think them making a bowl game is an improvement of what I had expectation wise. Now, I didn't mean that there was no way I saw them making a bowl game. If I was a betting man, I would have said they go, 5-7 or whatever, just missing, a bowl game. But
right.
Yeah, I like PJ Fleck. He definitely is a good speaker and a good recruiter. Excuse me, but he doesn't pull the top level talent into Minneapolis just because he doesn't have the payroll.
Yep.
As sad as that sounds to say now, he doesn't have the payroll. NIL is just not as prevalent or as what's the word you want to call it? As I don't know, robust in St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul. So you're not gonna get the top tier guys, and for what he's doing, 5-3 right now, pretty darn good.
Yeah, and it is hard because you look at Minnesota. There's really not a whole lot of NFL play, like big time star NFL players that have come from the University of Minnesota, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're not exactly the biggest pipeline, but they got a little bit. There's nobody that really stands out. So it, like you said, for the fact of what he's able to do, the fact that you're sitting at 5-3, you're 3-2 in the Big Ten overall.
Yeah,
he's a very good coach, and I do like the fact of what he's been able to do with Minnesota.
Well, talking about coaches being able to do with a lot with a little, let's move to Bloomington and the game again between the Hoosiers and the Washington Huskies. The Huskies come in, at the time 4-3, 2-2, kind of just middle of the pack right now, but still a good, an overachieving season to my point, or in my thought up to this point. Jed Fish gotten the Huskies actually. With some good wins, a win against Michigan, and they go into Bloomington.
Yeah,
I don't know that they don't perform the greatest, but IU going in there with their backup quarterback, Curtis Rourke, out because of a thumb injury that he sustained against Nebraska in the thumping. I'm saying this for a reason. I'm revisiting it and saying this for a reason. The thumping IU gave Nebraska, Curtis Rourke hurt his hand, his thumb, and was out in the second half. And IU still poured on a little bit of pointage on them in that second half. But let's talk about the Hoosiers. They're 8-0, 5-0 in the conference. Right now, there is feasibly a way that Oregon misses out on the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah,
and IU is involved with it.
Yeah, and do you want me to break it down? Because I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Do it.
So for anybody who is confused, because of Oregon coming in and they had to do all of these different schedule changes, not everybody is facing the same opponents all year round. So the only constant that is facing all of the teams that are at the top of the Big Ten right now is Ohio State, and Ohio State has already lost to Oregon. So Oregon could win out and be 12-0 and be undefeated. However, Indiana and Penn State both face Ohio State. And by the Big Ten rules, I believe it's rule number 3, if Penn State and Indiana beat Ohio State by even more than just 1 point, they would both qualify for the Big Ten championship game, and Oregon would be out of the Big Ten championship. They'll still be in the playoffs more than likely.
They could be ranked higher. They could have better averages. They could have beaten every team by 75 points more combined than either of the other two. And if both of them beat Ohio State by more than 1 point, Oregon gets booted out of the Big Ten championship game.
I do want to ask you something real quick, because I've seen this, and I've seen a lot of fans of another conference get a little butthurt when people have brought this comment up. And it was funny enough, it was a fan of an SEC team that brought this up. Is it not disrespectful to Indiana, the fact that they are 8-0, they're 5-0 in their conference, they're only ranked 13th? But if it was an SEC team that was 8-0, 5-0 in the conference, would they or would they not be at minimum top 10, more than likely top 5?
It is absolutely a snub about IU being that. But Dalton and I talked about this last week, is you're looking at historically the losingest program in
100%.
college football history.
100%.
Of the main power schools.
Correct.
So I get what you're saying. You don't go and IU basketball fans are the worst ones of these. You don't hold back on what's happened in the past. You go with what's going on right now.
Correct.
And you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say IU basketball fans are the worst with that.
Yes.
But my point on this is you can't necessarily look in the past and say, well, they're not. Look at what they've done historically. No, we're not going to do that. Yes, absolutely. They should be, in my thought, higher ranked. Now,
Right.
what helps them is when they go play Ohio State in a couple of weeks, if they beat Michigan and then happen to beat Ohio State, there's no doubt in my mind that they pretty much solidified their spot in the playoff. Honestly, if they beat both of those, and now don't get me wrong, Michigan is in a down season comparatively, but if they beat those two in back-to-back weeks, which they play them in back-to-back weeks, that's a pretty darn impressive resume, and that is your bookmark right there, the Ohio State bookmark in your chapter of what happened in 2024. And but yes, I honestly, if this was Vanderbilt even, Tony, I think that you absolutely have them at least, at the very least, top 10.
At least. And again, like you said, I know some of them will probably look at the past, and I even had somebody kind of get into a little bit of a argumentative dispute with me on my TikTok over that of IU, oh, well, you say they haven't played anybody, but then they'll potentially get in the Big Ten championship, all this weird stuff. It was one of those, it seemed like he more just wanted to argue.
Did you explain to him it's going to take a pretty big miracle for them to make it to the Big Ten championship game?
Oh, yes.
That's the biggest thing is, excuse me, I don't expect to see them beat Ohio State.
No.
I don't expect that at all.
No.
I also didn't expect the game that we're getting ready to talk about either this last Saturday. But I don't expect that in the least. So therefore, right there is enough to knock them off the pedestal to where Ohio State's either going to beat both Penn State and IU or they're going to lose to one of them. I don't believe they lose to both.
Right.
Okay. So that right there says Oregon's got the inside track to make it to Indianapolis.
Correct.
But who is it that's going to come out of that trio? I think it's going to be Ohio State personally.
Yeah.
I really do. Ohio State played the number one team in the country at this moment to a 1-point game. And if they'd have had 4 more seconds or 3 more seconds on the clock, they would have had a timeout called and at least an attempt to win that game. So Ohio State is not a doormat. They're not even having a down year, in my opinion.
Correct. Yeah, no. And believe me, I'm in the same boat. And like I said, we'll probably dive into this deeper as we talk about this coming weekend's games. Sure. But no, I definitely think it's, and I think I talked about this with you before at the beginning of the season. I had Oregon and Ohio State in the Big Ten championship already. And I said, I feel like it's a coin flip in the first matchup when they go to Oregon. And I feel like even if they go again to the Big Ten championship, it's still going to be another coin flip.
Yeah, I agree. But this game, IU in Washington, I listened to a little bit. I was doing some yard work and listened to a little bit. It wasn't the dominating 56-7 win over Nebraska, but really there was never really a time where IU was being really pressed. Like it just, I think it was 10-7 at one point, but then it got to double digits and it just stayed there. IU kept their distance. Basically the little brother that kept trying to come, and I'm not calling Washington the little brother, but you know how the funny, I'm keeping, you're just holding on to their forehead while they're trying to run at you.
Yep.
That's what I envisioned IU was doing basically the whole time I was listening. And it hurts, and everybody that is watching the stream can tell that that should be very hard for me to say. But I don't mind good stories, and if anything, IU is a fantastic story this football season. In and of itself, that makes me want to see how they do. And actually, I don't hope they lose all the time.
Yeah, it is one of those I've enjoyed the Kurt Signetti story more than anything too, because he was a recruiter on Nick Saban's staff, helped bring in, guys like Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, Mark Ingram, great guys for Nick Saban. Didn't want to stay a recruiting coach. He's like, look, I want a chance to be a head coach. gets his chance. He did fantastic for an IU team that was not the actual Hoosiers. Was a Division II school, so he took a bit of a pay grade, stepped down. Then he went to JMU. Now he's come to Indiana. In all honesty, he's probably done this in the best way. If he did use the transfer portal quite a bit to not only recruit a lot of his JMU players, but I think he's used the transfer portal in probably one of the best ways that I think, someone like Deion Sanders, who I know a lot of people have criticized, myself included, over the last couple of years of, you're taking your entire roster out of there and you're not really supplementing and adding it. And I feel like Kurt did a little bit more as far as adding and getting players that he knew, look, I don't care about your stats. I want to make sure that you're doing what I want to see on the film as far as play wise. And it's showing here because, like you said, even without Curtis Rourke, they had a fantastic run game with Ellison running for 123 yards. The defense is playing absolutely solid. So, I mean, it is overall a great story, and it's cool to see Cignetti, finally get a head coaching opportunity at his age, and for the Hoosiers to start out at 8-0. For of all teams, like you said, losing his Power 4 team in college football history with over 1,000 losses, and he's got him sitting at 8-0 in 2024.
Question: This is something I've come up with. I have my opinion, and I don't know that I've told you about it. Okay, so let's say Cignetti goes, excuse me, even 11-1.
Okay,
for the regular season.
Maybe
depending on the draw, because they go 11-1, they're going to the playoff. They should go to the playoff. Let's say they draw they're a 5 seed, they draw the 12 seed Boise State, whatever. They end up getting to the second round, they lose out in the second round, and somebody comes calling. I don't know who, but somebody comes calling to Kurt Cignetti. Do you think he runs?
I don't think he does, to be honest with you, because I mean, because here's how I look at it, and again, I could be completely wrong. You look at what he's been able to build with IU, and you can kind of see that the players have really picked up on that swagger. IU isn't exactly. Is it the most glorious job? No. But all honesty, you're in a position, to me, that is not a wide open Big Ten, but you can kind of be one of those sleeping dark horses of like what I would consider Michigan State used to have been more in kind of the early 2010s, of where, they get a win against Michigan. They would keep it close against Ohio State, maybe get an upset win in there type of thing. They weren't exactly the powerhouse, but they would keep it close. And you look at probably some of the jobs that are going to be available out there. I mean, Florida's probably going to be available out there. I wouldn't necessarily want to have to deal with the Florida job, because at the end of the day, you still have to deal with Bama. You still have to deal with Georgia, LSU, Texas, Oklahoma. Auburn, I would absolutely stay away from, because I feel like that's an even worse situation for him, especially if he's trying to stay as a Power 4 head coach. UNC maybe might be open if they decide to fire Mac Brown. I don't necessarily see that being the case. So, all honesty, you could look around at some of the other spots. I feel like you're not in a bad spot with IU, to me personally. And again, he's not going to be able to be a head coach for very long, more than likely because of his age and his health. So I would see him staying at IU personally.
So you think he's going to end his career? The guy who walks into the Big Ten Media Day without any sort of win under his belt and says, I've been picked next to last twice in my career. I've won the conference and then played for the conference title both of those times. You don't think him walking in, saying that without doing anything, and then showing that he can put that in place, you don't think somebody backs up a truckload of money that he takes it?
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. I definitely see people are probably going to try to poach him, but I don't know if
how hard is it going to be? You're at IU. I'm not at all. I'm not discrediting him because of my shirt. You're right. At IU. You turned it around to 1 year. How many times are you going to try to take that gamble that you're going to keep producing? Because you know what? I damn well know that IU was not his dream job.
More than likely, no.
It's his stepping stone to the next one. Now, I'm not getting angry. I'm just saying there's no way in my mind that IU is his resting place for more than 3 years, honestly, unless he just has an absolute in year 3 backfires, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we'll give you one more year. Let's get that back right on track. And, maybe.
Right.
I tell you, he wins 11 games this year, maybe 12, and he goes 9-4 next year. I don't think there's a third year of the Kirk Cignetti tenure at IU. And it's only
maybe
because where he is now. He's at IU.
And it may be one of those two. Maybe he plays a little bit more in the long game as far as, like I said, I think the two biggest positions that will be open this coming offseason will be Florida and Auburn. For sure. I think Billy Napier and Hugh Freeze are both gone. Again, maybe Mac Brown. Everywhere else, I feel like, honestly, it's a toss-up.
And it could be not next after this year. It could be next year. I'm just
right.
I am not convinced in any way, shape, or form that this is going to be his resting point for the rest of his career. I don't think Bloomington, Indiana, and no offense to actually whatever, Bloomington, Indiana was not his ideal. Now, Tim Allen, or not Tom Allen.
Tom Allen, yeah.
Tom Allen. His whole thing when he was interviewed when he first took the IU job, this is my resting point. This is my penultimate place right here. I could see him staying there for the rest of his career. I don't know what he's doing now. Maybe it was the rest of his career. Not my point. I just don't think Kirk Cignetti, coming from Alabama as a recruiting coach and then working his way up to JMU, now to IU, I just am not convinced that he's got the loyalty to say I'm staying at IU for 2 decades or whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, and I will say, for a couple of IU fans that I've talked to, I mean, he's 63. He'll be 64 next year. Like you said, maybe somebody backs up a truckload of money to him and offers it. And if he takes it, hey, good for him. And I think for a lot of even IU fans, they won't be necessarily mad at that because of it. But again, it was one of those, he never expected to even be in this position. He's like, look, I left a recruiting job. I'm, 50 plus years old. Then I got to be an offensive coordinator first, and then I can move on to being a head coach. He's like, I got to take a step down into Division II. I do nothing but win. Then he goes up.
Google me.
Yeah, Google me. And again, the fact that he has done so well with IU, and I think the other thing too, he had a lot of those ties with JMU and how successful JMU has done. He was able to bring a lot of that into IU. Like you said, how well can he consistently do it though for 2 to 3 years? And maybe that's something that also fuels him. Like, hey, you do, 1 to 2 stops at whatever you're doing, 1 to 2 years at each stop. When can you show us consistency as far as being with the program? But we've seen a lot of that too. There's a lot of guys that they don't necessarily stay loyal.
Flashes in the pan happen. And that's why I'm not convinced that if it happens this year that he doesn't go.
Right.
I'm not saying that he doesn't have confidence in himself.
Right.
I'm just saying he is a realist in some aspects too of, I wonder how long I can do this here.
That too.
So
yeah.
I need to maybe take, because you know what? No self-respecting IU fan can literally have a conversation with me. I'll take the Purdue stuff off. I don't care. None of them could have a conversation with me with a straight face, say, well, yeah, Bloomington's a great I use a great program to take over, to inherit. No,
right.
You can't do it. I couldn't even do that with Purdue. Like,
no.
And Purdue's had some good seasons. No.
Yeah.
It's not that's why Jeff Brom is in Louisville right now instead of still in West Lafayette. It's because it's not that final resting place to most people.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure there are some, but it's just no self-respecting IU fan can convince me that that Bloomington is an ideal coaching place. No.
Right.
Kirk Cignetti made that a successful program for this year.
Right.
I don't know what's going on after this year. That's for us to figure out and watch later,
Yeah.
So Let's jump. We got to get through a couple real quick before we get into the previews of this week. I'm not going to talk really in depth about the Penn State-Wisconsin game, but 28-13, big win for Penn State as they go into the game this week against Ohio State. Illinois travels to Oregon. I had this one wrong. I thought Illinois would show up a little bit more than what they had done. 38-9. They only mustered 3 field goals. Seriously?
Yep.
Come on. But that wasn't even the fact of the matter. It was, I thought Illinois' defense was going to show up a lot more. Don't get me wrong. I knew they were going to. I figured they'd lose by 2 scores. I didn't figure they were going to lose by almost 5.
Yeah, I figured it would almost be like a 35-21 type game. Again, I figured defense and offensively they might step up a little bit more. Yeah. Oregon definitely got off to a sluggish start to start the year. They got the win against Ohio State, and it seems ever since that Ohio State game they've been clicking and rolling. Real quick to the Penn State game, their offensive coordinator is Tom Allen, former head coach of the Hoosiers.
Oh, okay.
And believe it or not, they won that game against Wisconsin with a backup quarterback. Drew Aller was hurt that game.
Wow. Well, what is that? Bo Pribula?
Yeah, I'm not even gonna.
Bo Pribula, I guess.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. I tried to say it on my show Wednesday night, and I was like, I really hope I didn't butcher this. Yeah, basically, yeah. Yes.
So I didn't even realize Tom Allen had moved to Penn State and become the offensive coordinator there, but you know, good for him.
Right.
It wasn't the rest of his career.
Yeah, right.
But the big game that I wanted to talk about, it's the game that I thought going into the year, it could be 2 7-0 teams playing in this game. And can you imagine what people would be saying at a 21-17 Ohio State win over Nebraska if they were both undefeated?
Oh, believe me, I had the same exact thing. I did not think Nebraska would be tripped up by anybody, much less Illinois, and then to get obliterated by IU, I was like, what happened? I still have a lot of hope for Nebraska, but it could not believe what I was seeing.
I thought for sure when they played IU, they would at least showed up. I was thinking to myself, okay, I can definitely see in more scenarios than not Nebraska losing this game.
Yeah. None
of those were 56-7 thoughts.
Correct. I figured it would maybe be like a 28-31, like 38-30. Like I figured it would honestly come down to the wire. You know, maybe one team wins by like a touchdown, but you know, maybe nothing more than that. But yeah, to get absolutely whopped.
35-17, I would have went, woo! They thumped them.
Yeah, that's a rough game for them. Nebraska got their butt kicked. No, it was from the very beginning. Yeah. It was like 28-7. I'm like, oh, it's going to get worse.
And the reason why I bring that up is because of the 21-17 final score. Ohio State trailed late in this game to Nebraska. Nebraska played well, and this convinces me that we weren't completely off on our thought process of Nebraska being a pretty strong team. They only need one more win and they're bowl eligible, you know, and for them to take Ohio State was almost their bowl eligibility game. Like to think about that, Nebraska, they've got UCLA next,
then
which
USC,
USC, Wisconsin, and Iowa. They're gonna win at least one, if not two, if not three of those games.
Oh, 100%.
So they've got a very good, favorable schedule for themselves. But what I was looking at is Ohio State is, to me, probably the second. They may be accurately placed right now in the polls as the third best team in the polls. Yeah. I don't disagree with that at all. I think Georgia's a heck of a lot better than what they were. And the fact that they lost to Alabama is not as big of a chink in the armor when you take into consideration they were down by 21 plus in that game and had the lead on the next to last drive of the game.
Correct.
You can't they're good.
They're good.
I think Oregon's the best at this point, just for the fact that Ohio State and Oregon played.
Right.
Oregon beat them. Oregon's the best team in the
country.
It would have been the other way around. But for Ohio State to play at home against a team that was kind of waffling, kind of reeling a little bit from a real dismantling the week before, to a 4-point game.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about Ohio State about that after that?
I still have a little bit of questions. And it's funny because when you look at the stats, I mean, Will Howard was 13 of 16, 221 yards, 3 touchdowns. One of those incompletions was a pick. Right. So, I mean, that's about as good as a day for a quarterback as you can ask, even for Ohio State standards. Now, the running game is what has really kind of surprised me. Now, a lot of that is due to the fact that Ohio State's offensive line they're starting to get injured a lot more. You're starting to see a lot of those injuries come through because, I mean, Judkins was the lead carrier. He had 10 carries for 29 yards, and then Travion Henderson's right behind him with 10 carries for 25 yards. So they could not run the ball for anything. And I think that's where we probably see a lot of the stagnancy from Ohio State from that aspect of it. And I will say, too, I do have a little bit of question mark on the defense, only because they came in, especially against Oregon. They played a bunch of, power, actually Group 5 schools, for the fact that Marshall scored 14 on them was like a high of any of them. And it's like, yeah, your defense looks good until you play like big boys. And then, you're giving up a little bit more, but you're also facing off against better talent for sure. So that's where I'm a little bit hesitant. Again, I still have them in Oregon as my Big Ten championship favorites. And again, I still feel even if they reface off again, it will 100% be a coin flip. I don't think it's a Oregon takes it again type of thing.
I think maybe the only thing that plays into Ohio State's major favor is Oregon's got to come 3 hours back.
Correct.
Across the country. So the time zone difference, the time change. Now, granted, they'll come as early as they can to be able to acclimate. But it's still, there's a difference. You still have that internal clock of, I live in Oregon. Mm-hmm. Why are we playing this game at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever, or
correct.
Yeah. So this should be the 7 o'clock game. Why is it 4? It's enough of a wrench that it might hurt them a little bit. So let's go to this week. There's one big matchup. We'll get to that one here in just a minute. But Oregon travels, like I said, they travel across the country to go to Ann Arbor to take on the Michigan Wolverines. Tony, this is the biggest spread in the Big Ten this week. Oregon's 14.5-point favorites. Michigan 5-3 overall. Are we looking at the Michigan team we thought we were going to see this year?
I think so. I think this is one of those we had a lot of question marks about the team coming in. I think, at least for me, I expected the offensive line and run game to be a little bit better and that defense to be able to be complemented by that. I had a lot of questions as far as quarterback goes. Maybe they try to find somebody that is a little bit more of a game manager like J.J. McCarthy. But really it's been more of a disappointment more than anything because they've just had a quarterback carousel there in Ann Arbor as far as the quarterback situation they use.
Retire.
Yeah, they had Tuttle retire. So
is it Jack Tuttle?
Jack Tuttle, former Hoosier, by the way.
Yeah.
This is actually a little bit of a worse Michigan team than what I first pictured.
Yeah, and I think so too. They're at 5-3 right now, and they've still got Oregon on their schedule. Mm-hmm. They've still got Ohio State. I thought they were a potential 5-loss team, also including the Michigan State game, which we didn't even mention in our last week's games.
Yeah.
I thought Michigan State could jump up about him. They darn near did.
Yeah.
And that's not taking away again from anything that Jonathan Smith's done with the Spartans and the green over there, but you're still in a rebuilding phase. Michigan should be able to handle that. And they were struggling even with Michigan State. So I don't disagree that they're probably a little bit lower than what we were anticipating. Yeah. And wow, they've got Oregon's a 14.5-point favorite with the over-under at 44.5. So they're not expecting a ton of points on the board, but they surely expect Oregon to have
a big game,
two-score lead and win over that. Honestly, I don't know that 14.5 points is enough. With the way Oregon is performing. But just the second that I say that, Michigan will step up and run for 350 yards and make it a 27-24 game. Either way, I don't know. But honestly, I don't know that there's anybody getting on Oregon, coming close to Oregon the rest of the way here. Of the way home.
No, because they go to Michigan, then they take on Maryland, Wisconsin, and Washington. All of those are extremely winnable.
And I believe Wisconsin's at Autzen Stadium. It's in Oregon, isn't it?
No, it's in Wisconsin. It's at Camp Randall.
Okay, well,
that may be.
That's their worst game. I'm going to say that. I'm not going to say, or that's their toughest game. I'm not even going to say that they're even close to going to lose that game.
Yeah,
but
Washington maybe just because of the history in the last couple of years with how Washington beat them up. But this is again another Washington team that is, I think, just as depleted as Michigan because of players either transferring or going to the NFL. So,
yep, I agree. Number 24 Minnesota Minnesota visits number 24 Illinois at also a noon Eastern kickoff on FS1. They're Minnesota 3-point favorite on the road to a ranked opponent. That kind of lends to what we just talked about PJ Fleck kind of overachieving with the roster in which Minnesota has right now on there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this also kind of gives an idea too, as far as how little bit of faith that Vegas has as far as Illinois goes. I mean, they lost to Penn State, and I mean, it was really the same boat with Penn State. They lost 21-7. So it's one of those, you're losing bigger games, by pretty marginal fashions. Your two biggest wins was one against Kansas, 23-17, and then your other one against Nebraska when they were ranked number 22.
Don't forget Michigan.
And you beat Michigan, and you shut out Michigan.
They were ranked too.
Yeah, which I will say, I think had they maybe kept it closer against Oregon, this might be a different spread because the way they beat Michigan. But the fact that you got destroyed by Oregon, it's like, we don't necessarily trust that.
Yep. Number 13, Indiana. Yes, I called them Indiana. Oh, kills me. Travels to East Lansing to take on Michigan State. The aforementioned Spartans coming off a tough loss against Michigan. A little bit of a kerfuffle even in that game. Don't know the ins and outs of that. Didn't really pay too much attention to the game other than following how the score was going with that Michigan State Michigan game last week. But excuse me, this is not a gimme for IU.
No, I will say I actually have this as kind of a trap game for IU.
Yeah.
And I say that because of how well Michigan State, considering what Michigan State has, the fact that they're in the same boat of they have a new coach, new quarterback, new system, new just about everything. Yeah. And the fact that they're sitting at 4-4 overall, they're sitting at 2-3 in the conference isn't necessarily a bad thing. I will say just real quick, as far as them against Michigan, they did really well at running the ball. And on the very last drive, they're still down by 2 scores, and they're running the ball, and there's like 5 minutes left. And I'm like, you're not really doing this whole hurry up offense thing. And not saying you have to just throw the ball, but you're not up by 2 scores, and you're not trying to get a game tying touchdown. You still need to get another flipping score. Stop running the ball.
You need the ball twice. You need the ball twice. And I talked about the Michigan State offense, about them needing to produce more in the red zone. They were,
and they struggled in that a lot. That entire game,
they struggle inside the 20 of putting the ball in the end zone. They have an amazingly good kicker that can kick the ball basically from anywhere on this side, on the plus side of the 50. But you got to get 7. Keep that field goal kicker to 1 point at a time, because if he's scoring 1 point, if he's scoring 5 points and they're all on extra points, that means you got 35. All right. You've got to, instead of giving him 4 field goals and so he's got 13 total points, you're winning a lot less games when you have to rely on your kicker to do your job, your scoring job.
Yeah, and that was really their issue against Michigan, is they could march it down the field and they could get to the end zone, but they could not get into the end zone. And that was really frustrating to watch, because it's like, man, you've got all these good drives and how you're doing, and it's not coming to fruition.
Well, IU is gonna have Curtis Rourke for the game against Michigan State. That's something going in the Hoosiers' favor. They are favored by 8. What is it? Just 8 flat. 8
Yep.
8 points over under 52.5. They think the more is going to be scored during that game than the Oregon-Michigan game. Not too sure about that one, but actually, it's the second highest over under in the conference this week. Nebraska or UCLA travels to Nebraska. The Cornhuskers should become bowl eligible for the first time since 2015, I think is what it was. What it is with that game. That's a 3:30 kick on Big Ten Network. Oregon 3:30. Oregon and Michigan 3:30 game on CBS or Paramount Plus. IU and Michigan State. That's a 3:30 game on Peacock. Then the NBC game of the week. There's got to be a way to flex. I really.
There should be.
There should be a way to flex because we haven't got to the game of the week yet, and you'll hear and understand why I'm saying this. Wisconsin travels to Iowa in Kinnick Stadium at 7:30 for the Nebraska or for the NBC evening game. Not necessarily the best of games to have as your highlight. Your look at the Big Ten. Idwa is awful rough around the edges because there is no O in Iowa. But they're favored by 3, which means it's a push because you get 3 for being home. So I don't have much to say about that game other than Iowa put 40 on the board last week, but it was against Northwestern. Wisconsin's better than Northwestern. I don't think they sniffed 30.
Yeah, in all honesty, from what little bit I've seen of Wisconsin this year, I like what Luke Fickell has done. I think, at least for me, you started to see a little bit of that Wisconsin transformation, and I think what not only Wisconsin was looking for when they hired Luke Fickell, but what Luke Fickell was looking for when he first came in. Yeah. This is definitely a better team than what I expected, especially them coming in. Their overall record is 5-3, which honestly isn't bad. They kept it close against Penn State for a while. I honestly think Wisconsin comes out with the win over Iowa.
I don't disagree. USC travels to Seattle to take on the Washington Huskies. I really don't have anything to say about that even. I think the USC offense is better than Washington's offense, but I think Washington's defense is markedly better than USC's defense. If there was a capability of a tie, we might be looking at it. I don't know. I really don't.
Yeah. Maybe I think with USC's offense with Miller Moss and the way that he's been able to move the ball and the fact that just overall USC's defense has stepped up, and I think just as anemic as Washington's offense has been with Will Rogers and Jed Fish, I think USC I think they easily take the win. Not saying it's going to be a high scoring game, but I think they take the win over Washington.
Yeah. That is also a 7:30 p.m. kickoff time on the Big Ten Network. Now, the reason why I stated there has to be some flex in there. High noon. I'm sure Fox is going to be there. Their pregame show will be in at Beaver Stadium in University Park, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Penn State, number 3 in the country, hosts the number 4 Ohio State Buckeyes. This should be a pretty good game, but do you have any doubt for Ohio State?
No, I don't. I honestly, I have more doubt for Penn State. Penn State just continues to be that school. They come in. I'm going to say they're one of the few schools that I look whenever I look at a lot of the college football rankings throughout the year. They come in very overhyped. I mean, you look at the fact they had to absolutely claw their way back against USC. They did beat a Wisconsin team. They honestly struggled a little bit against UCLA. They really haven't showed me a true convincing win over anybody other than number 19 Illinois 3 weeks ago. So to me, I don't doubt Ohio State's going to be able to get the win. They've won the last 9 out of 10 against them, and ESPN's matchup predictor has Ohio State winning 61% chance of winning to Penn State's 39.
One of these times, Penn State's not going to be overhyped. One of these times, they're going to come into these matchups with, well, if they can just win, and they're going to. I think that I like James Franklin. Whatever people want to say about him, I like what he stepped into. Granted, Bill O'Reilly did a lot in his 2 seasons at Penn State, maybe only one, but just a couple of seasons after the whole scandal back a few years back that really decimated Penn State and took away scholarships, it basically ripped Penn State to its bare bones.
Yeah.
And somebody had to rebuild it. I think Bill O'Brien, not Bill O'Reilly.
I was like, Bill O'Reilly.
Sorry, Bill O'Brien.
what a career change.
But yeah. But Bill O'Brien then leaves and goes to coach the Texans. James Franklin steps in there, and I think he's done a wonderful job rebuilding the Penn State name, brand, and what it means to be a Nittany Lion and an alum of Penn State. One of these days, they're going to live up to the hype. I just don't think it's this week.
Yeah. I say James Franklin is 1-13 against top 5 opponents. Ryan Day is 2-7. So one of these guys is going to get a win.
They are both right now very underachieving with what they have in their stable.
Correct.
But that you can't always damn the coach for that.
No. I think for me, because a lot of people, and I know we've talked about this several times, just overall with Ryan Day's overall coaching record. I think he's 62-9 or 62-10 overall as a head coach, and the fact that he's 2-7 against the top 5. You have to think about it, with the exception of really that first Michigan game, when they first went on this whole 3-year winning streak. Ohio State has been in every single game that he's coached, especially the last few games. You look at Georgia, took it down to the absolute wire. You look at Oregon, took it down to the absolute wire. The last two matchups against Michigan took it down to the absolute wire. So I think for me, this is more of a Ryan Day, like, hey, look, I can do this. It's just when you go up against the top 5 teams in the country, they're the top 5 for the reason. It's very rare that you ever get a team of, they're top 5. They don't really deserve to be there, but they're top 5 because they're undefeated for whatever reason. Like, no,
right?
They're in that spot because they are one of the best teams in the country.
Excuse me. Yeah, both of these teams, in my opinion, belong where they're at right now to this point.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is going to lose, and one of them is going to fall out of the top 5. Period.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's Penn State, who's undefeated. If they lose, they're dropping out of the top 5. The top 5 right now is very good, very, very good, including whichever one of these teams loses. But there are plenty below them that will happily step up into that top 5. And now this is the last week we won't have computer rankings. So this top 5 could be completely different once we get out of this week.
Yes.
But my point being is as the benchmark of who's our best teams, we go by the AP poll right now until the computer rankings come out. Right now, these two absolutely belong in the top 5 and absolutely, I think, should give us a good game. I just still think Ohio State wins this game. Can I see Penn State winning this? Yes. I just don't see it as a realistic possibility.
Yeah, I don't see it as likely. I mean, they've kept it close against Ohio State the last few matchups that they've played, but again, I think just overall talent, I haven't really seen enough out of Drew Aller in big moments to really be convinced about that. In all honesty, I could say that for a lot of the Penn State team, not saying that they're not talented. I don't think that the potential isn't there, but until they prove to me that they can get over that hump and beat Ohio State and beat Michigan, which we won't find out probably until next year if they can beat Michigan or not, I have a lot of question marks with Penn State.
Beat Ohio State first.
Correct.
Beat Ohio State
beat who's
first
on your schedule.
and go into the playoff this year. Have a good showing this year. We can worry about that next year.
Right.
Beat the people that are on your schedule now. Don't worry about whether or not you can beat Michigan if you beat Ohio State because you ain't got to play them.
Correct.
Don't worry about it.
Correct.
But you're right. That you're until they do it, they're going to have that mental block every time they go against Michigan until they beat them. They're going to have that block every time against Ohio State until they beat them. And even when they beat them, they may still have that lingering thing. But here's the thing. They absolutely belong where they're at. They belong in this game. Now, they play it no matter what.
Correct.
But they belong on the field with Ohio State. So I don't, even if Ohio State wins by 14 points, I still think Penn State's a really good program, a really good team, and I think they belong on the field with Ohio State, even if they lose by 2 scores.
Yeah.
But they got to get out of their own head, I think, too.
Correct. Because at the end of the day, they still, like you said, James Franklin has done wonders for Penn State. He still recruits well. He still coaches well. He just, it's hard for him to win in the big moments. And I feel like a lot more coaches have that than what we realize. We've just been spoiled with people like Urban Meyer, with Nick Saban, with Kirby Smart, with Coach Orgeron. Like, these guys can win in big games, and they win in a lot of big games. Some of those coaches have harder times doing that than others.
That's right. So it'll be interesting. That is a 12 o'clock kickoff from Beaver Stadium. And I don't Happy Valley.
Yeah, Happy Valley.
And 12 o'clock noon kickoff for number 3, number 4, rather than the marquee matchup at 7:30 on ABC. But whatever, I don't care. It'll still happen. So all right, well, that brings us to the end of the morning, and instead of Sam doing it, our fill-in is, let's see if he can walk this rope. Tony, why don't you tell people how they can find us?
I think I can get this now that I have my visual aids to help me here. You can find us on Facebook at Big Talk. That is B1G Talk. You don't have to put the underscore in there. Now, remember, you have to look for that logo up here because we're not the other Big Talk. Not same. Not same, totally different.
Not all Big Talk. Those are fine people. They're not us people.
Correct. And you can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, and the TikToks at B1G_talk. You can find us there as well as you can find us every week on the All Sports All Plays Network that you can get on your Android or Apple device, whichever one you prefer.
Whichever.
And Sam is courteous enough because he does all the background work for this. You can also get it on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, on the Lounge Media Group, and wherever you find your podcasts later in the day.
All right. Well, Tony, it's going to be a good weekend of football. There's more happening than just in the Big Ten, but there's a lot in the Big Ten that could keep us very busy and really keeping up on what's going on in the Big Ten with football. But and notice I didn't mention Northwestern and Purdue played today or this week. So no, it's definitely going to be a fun weekend. So Tony, thank you for filling in for me while I fill in for Dalton.
Of course.
And that brings us to the end of this newest episode of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. For Tony Hollinsworth, I am Sam Sprunger. Dalton Shetler doing his thing elsewhere for this week. He will be back as soon as he possibly can. But thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.